some connection with Dallas Temple. Dallas, Houston, St. Louis. Temple is very wonderful. So we'll begin by offering pranams to Srila Prabhupada, Nama Om Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Dallas, Houston, St. Louis. Swamini Tanamani, Namaste, Saraswati Devi, Gaudamani Pracharini, Nirnavasesha Shunyavadi, Pashtachadesha Tarname. Om Gana Tamananda Shah, Gananjana Shalakaya, Chakshum Meditam Jena, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. We were born in the darkest of ignorance, but our spiritual master is opening our eyes with the torch of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto his lotus feet. Sri Chaitanya Manovistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale, Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapatandikam. When will Srila Rupa Goswami Prabhupada, who has established within this material world the mission to fulfill the desire of Lord Chaitanya, give us shelter at his lotus feet? Hare Krishna.
You should understand that at that time, when we began this Radha Damodar party, actually the party was already there, but it was only 8 devotees, and they did practically. Sahotra Swami, he was a member of the original party before I came to join them, and there were only 8 people, and only Sahotra Swami and 1 or 2 others were distributing books, a few books. They had a traveling. They would go in a van and travel and distribute books. So the big leading book distributors were, Australian BBT. They had a very big Sankirtan party. Los Angeles had a very big party, and the Los Angeles BBT had a big party. So we could not compete. So I thought that the only way we're going to compete is that we're going to beat them by numbers of people. We're going to make so many devotees that they will be defeated. So first of all, people did join, that's true, on the street. But the main thing is 2 things. One thing, that when we preach to people, we preach with great absolute conviction that the material world is rotten, that you are in a rotten condition, that Krishna consciousness is wonderful, and that Krishna consciousness is the only thing that is going to actually help you and help the world. In other words, we preach with absolute conviction, without making any compromise in what we spoke. We were very, very heavy and forceful. I told Harinam and Navina last night that we were so confident. One time we came to, I came from Florida, which is the southern part of the U.S., to New York because they had a good Sunday feast, and I knew there would be many people there. And I took the president's permission. I said, whatever devotees I can make here, let me take with me. Actually, the first year we made all the devotees because nobody was making many devotees in America. People were coming in the temple for years and nobody ever thought to ask them to join. Of course, after we did this for 1 year, nobody gave me permission again. The next year, because they all realized that we could have got these people. But anyway, I bought 5 airplane tickets to return to Florida in the airport before I went to the temple. And I kept the tickets, and I gave the Sunday lecture, and I held up these 5 tickets. And I said, I got 5 tickets. It was freezing cold in the winter, the dead of winter, in New York, And I said, I got these 5 tickets to Florida. We are in Florida. What is the name of that place where we were in that? Where I forget the name of that beach, but there's a famous beach in Florida where. I really forget. But anyway, that's where we were. I said I got these 5 tickets, and the first 5 people who want these tickets should come up, and you can get them and come with me. And then I explained a little bit. I cheated them, just like Prabhupada cheated. That you'll have a feast every day. You don't have to do anything. You just come down here and be with us. As long as you can stay for 1 month, the ticket is yours. And I said, now how many people want this after the lecture? Many people raised their hands, and I had different people in the audience, our devotees, to go and talk with them. Then I interviewed them in the president's office one by one. I picked the best 5 people, and we went, and it wasn't easy to get them out that night because I had to leave the next morning. We worked all night. Some of them had girlfriends, that were practically, they couldn't believe what was happening. We had to fight with their girlfriends, fight with the parents, and by the morning we got in the car, and we went to the airport, and all with the 5 people, and we went back to Florida. So there was so much conviction that Krishna consciousness is wonderful and the material world is lousy, terrible place.
Thank you, Damian Prabhu. Today we are very, very fortunate to have 3 speakers with us, and each speaker will have 30 minutes. And then we'll open it up for the speakers to interact with one another, but also others to ask questions and, further the conversation. So the first speaker we have is His Grace Govindadatta Prabhu. And because these recordings are being made for posterity, I'd like to introduce the speakers so that in the future, when people also listen to these and see these, they do know who the speakers were. So His Grace Govindadatta Prabhu started attending the temple in St. Louis, Missouri in 1973, but never joined. Then in 1974, the Radha Damodar traveling Sankirtan party pulled in and preached to him for 4 hours that he had to join them right then. That was the beginning of his Krishna consciousness. After some time, they traveled to Gainesville, Florida, where he met His Holiness Mal Krishna Goswami and His Holiness Vishwajana Goswami for the first time. They only spent a few days together there, and after a short time, he became one of the van leaders. His service had always been Sankirtan. Approximately in 1984, he became a full-time manager for ISKCON and part-time Sankirtan. His management service for ISKCON ended after 20 years in ISKCON, Los Angeles, in 2010. Currently, he is working at starting a Prasadam program at UCLA and is living in Los Angeles. Welcome, Govindadatta Prabhu. Please, you have the floor.
Haribol Prabhu, thank you for inviting me. It's a very, very nice opportunity to glorify the Radha Damodar Traveling Sankirtan Party and His Holiness Tamal Krishna Goswami and His Holiness Vishnujan Swami. So that same experience I had that Tamal Krishna Goswami was explaining, no one had asked me to join the temple. I had been visiting. I had no idea that you could join. I thought it was a group of monks and you would go there and visit. And I was so overwhelmed by their kindness, very overwhelmed by the prasadam. 1973, I was driving along and the Beatles were singing about Krishna. A friend of mine who was totally intoxicated. I never took part in that. I guess I was what you would call straight. And he pointed out that the Beatles were singing about Krishna. And I was just clueless. That was before cell phones, before computers. And I was just asking as many of my friends as I could about Krishna. And so finally, one friend, we call it blooped, he had left the Los Angeles Temple and came to the St. Louis area and took me to the temple. My mind was just blown away by all of the wonderful prasadam that was offered. Actually, my other friends, when I became vegetarian, thought I would die. So they used to try to sneak meat into my food. Dude, you got to eat some meat, man, you're going to die. But that wasn't the case. So then, as you explained, 1974, the Radha Damodar Traveling Sankirtan Party came and they cornered me for 4 hours. I think we did the same thing to Prahladananda Priya Prabhu, Prahlad Priya. But anyway, that was a wonderful experience. And they wanted me to promise that I would stay tonight. Just stay, don't leave. That was their enthusiasm. That was their kindness. And I was very, very entangled. I had a new car. I had a new motorcycle. College was beginning again. My second year of college was going to begin. And I had a full scholarship for college. And I had a job. So I told, and my mother and father were divorced. So I had to pick up my brother to take him back home to my mother. So I said, I can't stay tonight. I promised I would take my brother home. So I left that night, promising to be back in the early morning. And I kept my promise, even though I was supposed to check into work that morning. And I called into work and I said, look, I'm not coming into work. Are you sick? I said, yeah. Because they had preached to me, I became sick of the material world. So I just said, yeah, I'm sick. Oh, okay, we'll see you tomorrow. I said, no, I'm not going to come tomorrow either. Oh, are you real sick? Are you very sick? I said, just for now, cancel all of my work. The devotees had preached to me. And it was Drista Dumna and Aja. They were in charge of a party. They did not yet have a bus. They had a very broken down van that they were traveling in. So when I came, I donated my car and my motorcycle and my life savings of $500 at that time. So they were very, very, happy to get that donation. And we were doing Harinam on the sidewalks. I can remember doing Harinams on the sidewalks, and I can remember the police stopping. Like, what are you all doing? We're just singing the names of God. So they didn't arrest us at that point. They had not yet arrested us. So after about a week in St. Louis, because they had promised me that we would travel around the country. So I said, hey, I thought there was some travel, because they made me promise I would stay for 1 week. And quite truthfully, my experience was that it was as if I had stopped beating myself in the head with a hammer, joining Krishna consciousness, because I was exploiting my if you can call them entanglements. I'll call them entanglements rather than opportunities in the material world. I'll call them entanglements. I was explaining. So that was such relief. So they all agreed to pack it all up. The first place we went to was Atlanta before we went to Gainesville. And wonderful experiences. We used to set up at the university, and we would do Harinam and I would say more bhajan, sitting down, and giving out nice prasadam, that famous drink, buttermilk, strawberry, and orange drink that I'm sure everyone's been speaking about, that drink that we would serve out on the Radha Damodar party, as well as nice prasadam. And students would come and take prasadam. I don't remember making any devotees at that time. They're in Atlanta. So, and then we went to Gainesville. And Gainesville Temple, they had started their Krishna lunch program at the university. So we would go. And oh my gosh, if we distributed 50 plates of prasadam, it was so wonderful. And the dancing at the kirtans became more and more ecstatic, And we did that for some time until they announced that they needed some devotees to volunteer for Sankirtan, book distribution. Of course, Sankirtan was also the Harinam program that we were doing, but this program would be distributing Srila Prabhupada's books. So they had everyone volunteer to try distributing. We all went to parking lots, and I had no clue. I had never done this before, approaching people one-on-one with a book. I had no clue what to say, what to do, and I didn't have very much success. Other devotees had more success. There was another devotee on our party call. His name was Garanga. I don't know if you've been able to get in touch with him. Very wonderful devotee. And Ramacharya, I saw pictures of Ramacharya. I don't know if he's still in contact with the devotees. I have not kept contact with many other devotees on Radha Damodar party, except here in Los Angeles. Swavas Prabhu, Naikama Prabhu, they're brothers. And then there's Brigupati Prabhu here. And I was just speaking with another god brother, Kalki Das, who said yes, that you did contact him, but he said he declined. I told him, oh, you should come. It was such an ecstatic time. So anyway, 1974, we began full-time book distribution. So Srila Prabhupada had written a letter saying that of the two, meaning book distribution and Harinam, book distribution was more important. Now, in the next line, Srila Prabhupada said, not that the Harinam should stop. So I think we were developing tunnel vision for the book distribution, that Srila Prabhupada had put so much emphasis also on the book distribution. He wanted that 50% of the temple income be put towards preaching and especially book distribution. But then whenever I say preaching, that also includes Harinam. So Prabhupada in the next line said, not that the Harinam should stop, but that's where we had lost Vishnu, His Holiness Vishnu John Swami, because his heart and soul was into the Harinam. So again, that's my take on why Vishnu John Swami had drifted away. I'll use the word drifted away because I was with them until 1976. So we sometimes went on different bus parties. So at that time I was with Dristadumna until the 1975 big initiation in Chicago, where Srila Prabhupada handed me these very beads that I have even till today. And I asked Krishna for 2 benedictions. When Srila Prabhupada handed me my beads, I said, I want a larger set because some of the sets were smaller. As I think it was explained, there were 80. I thought it was 108 devotees being initiated. I had to wait over a year to get initiated. So that was one benediction, that I got a larger set. I said I need a larger set, not a smaller set. So Krishna gave me this larger set. And the other benediction, I said, please, 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 don't ever let me lose my beads. And Krishna gave me that benediction as well. 3 days later, it was because we were doing full-time book distribution and collecting donations. Actually, a lot of Lakshmi at that time. We were, as I remember, our party was giving Srila Prabhupada $30,000 a month to build Mayapur, to build Vrindavan, to build Mumbai temples. And we just, Tamal Krishna Goswami had us so focused on pleasing Srila Prabhupada. Dristadumna Maharaj as well, and our Dristadumna Prabhu now, I'm not sure, maybe he's sannyasi again, had us focused on pleasing Srila Prabhupada. And we were totally convinced that Srila Prabhupada was in direct communication with Krishna. So much so that we knew we had to please Srila Prabhupada. So we dedicated our life at that time. I was, as you pointed out, I was one of the band leaders, one of the Sankirtan leaders. And I said, let's make it a policy on our party. There's 24 hours in a day. And I had actually learned this from the New Vrindavan devotees who we were competing against. But many of them were my dear close friends. So we shared some trade secrets. Like I told them, you can heat your van with your cooking stove, because we would spend some time in the northern. There were competition in the lots. There were children of God. That was started by another devotee I learned later. And there were a group called the Munis, Unification Church. So we had competition in the lots. So I told the devotees, hey, let's go north where it's freezing cold. Freezing cold. So actually, when I was with Tamal Krishna Goswami's party, we went up north to Detroit and other places. The big Christmas marathon was spent in the Washington, D.C. area, freezing cold rain. And I can remember that Tamal Krishna Goswami one day bought all of us devotees thermally insulated boots. He was very concerned that we somehow would stay warm. Before that, we wouldn't want to spend a dime on ourselves. And God, I kind of lost my train of thought that we had the plan that there's 24 hours in a day. We wanted to spend, I encourage the devotees, let's spend more than 12 hours a day on Sankirtan. And all the other time, of course, we had to take rest. We had to cook. sometimes we would be cooking and driving in a van. At the same time, we'd have the stove. We would be cooking. I guess I was, we lived like combat, just like commandos. Nothing cool. We knew, we were convinced Tamal Krishna Goswami would always preach to us. And nothing can stop Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan. Nothing, even we would be arrested and put into jail, and they would cut off our neck beads. And that's why we used to get neck beads with clasps. One year I went to India and I said, they were selling me neck beads. I said, I need neck beads with clasps. They said, oh, that's right. Sometimes you don't want to be devotees. I said, no. That's not the reason. And by this time I had like 8 or 10 men standing around us at the booth there in Vrindavan, where we would buy most of our supplies. And I said, no, we buy them with clasps because we get arrested. And when you're arrested, they cut the neck bead off and the beads fly everywhere. So they said, because have you ever been arrested? I said, oh, I've been arrested at least 100 times. So then they all backed off. Actually, one time I was arrested on a Friday, and unfortunately I wasn't going to be seen until Monday. And for some reason, the devotees didn't bail me out. So I fasted while I was in jail. And the other prisoners, this was in Virginia. So the other prisoners said, hey, did you get him yet? Did you get him? And that I understood that meant if he had raped me yet. The guy I was in the cell with, he was a big guy. He could easily tear me in half. He was twice my size. So I said, oh, I better preach to this guy day and night. And I did, and he didn't rape me. I was very, very thankful to Krishna that Krishna protected me while I was in jail. So when I got out of jail, that I had been fasting, they kept saying, hey, you got to eat. You're going to get yourself in more trouble. So the guy next to me said, just give it to me. So I did that. I didn't want to get in more trouble, but little did I realize that I could have gotten them in more trouble. That we don't eat meat. That's all they serve in jail. So when I got out, the devotees had just come to pick me up to bail me out. So as I was walking out of the jail, at the same time, the devotees had arrived to pick me up. So I said, well, I hope you brought prasadam. I haven't eaten in 4 days. They said, oh, don't you know, today's a fasting day.
Oh.
But I think it was Srimati Radharani's appearance day, and so the fast was only till noon. And by the time we got, and I hadn't bathed, I wasn't going to. The only bathing facility was if you stripped naked there in the cell, and I wasn't about to do that. They were already the other inmates were already asking if he had raped me yet. So I haven't bathed, shaved, eaten in 4 days. When I went before the judge said, you need to come up with $100. I said, Your Honor, I'm a monk. I don't have any money. He said, well, then you're going right back to jail, boy. And they took me back to jail, but in an hour they had released me. The guards came back and said, okay, because I explained to the judge that I hadn't eaten in 4 days, haven't bathed. I said, you should release me. So anyway, by the time we got back to the temple and I had bathed, then it was time to honor prasadam anyway. But we thought nothing of that for Srila Prabhupada's mission. And we understood Tamal Krishna Goswami was a direct representative of Srila Prabhupada, so we never questioned. And we never questioned any of our orders given to us. And I said we would try to do at least 12 hours, but on the weekends, I don't know if you've devotees experienced something called drive-in movie theaters. We would try to do Sankirtan. We would sneak into the drive-in movie theaters to distribute books. And sometimes we would get kicked out. Sometimes we would do very well. And we would also do something called Santa Claus. I'm sure that was spoken of, that the devotees were the real Santa Claus. So, of course, sometimes the press would give us very negative publicity. sometimes very favorable, but it was so favorable for distributing books. But Srila Prabhupada wrote that if it turns the public opinion against us, then we should stop it. So most of the devotees stopped it. I can remember in New York, I had so many favorable reactions from the people being dressed as Santa Claus that you're much better than those trunks that the Salvation Army uses. You're a much better Santa Claus. And I would tell them, ho, 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 Hare Krishna. Here's a free gift. And we would give them a book that was wrapped, gift wrapped. But anyway, in this way, we were understanding. Srila Prabhupada explained to us, Tamal Krishna Goswami explained to us, Srila Prabhupada said that they give even a farthing, Prabhupada would use the word farthing, even if they gave a farthing to help push on this Krishna consciousness movement, that they would be saved from going to the deepest, darkest regions of hellish existence. So that was part of our motivation. We were criticized for not having much program. Actually, we had program every morning. It was a shortened program, and even class every morning. And we would actually also stop for 1 hour to read. So in this way, we were very inspired. Oh my gosh. I mean, I'm seeing now that it's 9:30. Is my time over already? First time.
You have another 9 minutes, Prabhu.
9 minutes. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Because yeah, I mean, there's so many pastimes with the Radha Damodar party, how we would, I remember being, as I said, in Atlanta, and it was my first experience that a group of, we were in our dhotis, we were all together there. Vishnu John Swami was there. I believe we had the bus there in Atlanta. I'm trying to remember. And a group of men came to more or less harass us. And so Vishnu John Swami called out, demons, attack them. And I was quite shocked. This was my first experience that we should fight. We should fight on behalf of Krishna. And the boys left, but Vishnu John Swami did not hesitate, to call us all together and defend Krishna. So that was my first experience. I guess just like Srila Prabhupada's first experience that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said to kill the snake, the cobra snake that was in the compound. So in the same way, Vishnu John Swami gave the order, attack. So we were ready. We had whatever we had, big pots or whatever. We didn't have guns, of course, but we were ready for that. And we all gathered together for different festivals. It was so enlivening, so ecstatic, and the dancing. Practically, you could say that it was just wild, the dancing while we were chanting. And it wasn't anything. It was fun, as Prabhupada pointed out. It was spontaneous, even though it was probably offensive. Many could say it was offensive to the deities, possibly offensive sometimes to guests. In Mayapur, we were grabbing guests. And as far as I understand, Srila Prabhupada didn't like that we would grab the guests, to dance. And sometimes we pushed each other. We were young. We were 18. I was 19 years old at the time. What do 19-year-olds do? But I was saved from all of that illicit sex, intoxication, meat eating, and gambling that you do as a 19-year-old or as 20-year-olds, etc., 30-year-olds. So somehow Krishna, I see it that the Radha Damodar Sankirtan party saved me and allowed me to use all of that youthful energy that I had in distributing books. Sometimes we went before that one time because Amarendra Prabhu actually made friends with an attorney in Gainesville, Florida. And we were arrested so many times. The judge told us, boys, the next time I see you, you better bring your towel and your toothbrush, because we were arrested so many times. But again, we then did move on. We went to other places for preaching. I worked mainly in the Bible Belt, and we would travel back to a temple each Sunday. And it was so enlivening. We would practically drive day and night to go back to the temple and have the beautiful feast prasadam. We would send in our scores. Yes, we had a quota, but I read in the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the introduction, that all of the devotees of Lord Chaitanya fulfilled their quota. So Srila Prabhupada wrote this, and I thought, well, this quote is not artificial. And similarly, when a devotee, I'm forgetting his name right now, that started the Sankirtan newsletter, and he visits the Tucson Temple quite often. Anyway, Prabhupada liked the competition. And I think he wrote a letter that Tamal Krishna Goswami would die if the Los Angeles Temple beat him, something to that effect. He would have a heart attack. So we encourage competition. Unfortunately, sometimes I think the competition became that devotees would cut the tires of other devotees. Now that's not transcendental competition. And I just feel in foresight that we could have done it better on Radha Damodar party if we had actually, Srila Prabhupada said, if we're in someone else's zone, we should give them, we should purchase all of our books from them and give them half of the profits. Srila Prabhupada wanted us to be, magnanimous to the other devotees and encourage them as well. So I just thought, well, had we, any of the devotees that we picked up at the temples, had we encouraged the temple by saying, hey, don't worry, you'll get some of the profit, you'll get some of the book score, you'll get recognition. But as Tamal Krishna Goswami said, that the competition was so intense. And Srila Prabhupada encouraged competition, but maybe we didn't do it as maturely as we should have, that we made a lot of temples upset. I can remember being invited, we were going to the Los Angeles Temple with our bus, and the Los Angeles Temple said, we don't want you to come. So that was brought to Srila Prabhupada's attention, and Srila Prabhupada said, this is my temple, and you are very welcome to come. So we went, but that's more or less the image that we had after some time, and that's disappointing. But again, it was all a learning experience. We learn in Krishna consciousness, and we want to share, we want to mature, and the book distribution that we did, Srila Prabhupada was so pleased with the amount of books being distributed. He said, never in history, and he said that this time in history would be recorded as being a time when it would change the world, and it did. I can remember in the beginning days, 1973, being a vegetarian, as I said, my friends thought I would die, and yoga was ridiculed. But now I understand, due to ISKCON, vegetarianism, yoga, so many of these understandings, karma, have been brought into the forefront, and it's very ecstatic. It's very ecstatic. So I would never trade those days. I would never trade those days. They were very, very wonderful days, and sometimes we would be criticized as being beggars. So Prabhupada, again, with his genius, defeated that understanding. Beggars? Beggars, they have nothing to give. We are giving them the opportunity of engaging in Krishna consciousness. And Prabhupada understood this to be their saving grace, So we were distributing books. Devotees would find books in the trash cans. They brought it up to Srila Prabhupada's attention. The Radha Damodar parties distributing a lot of books, Srila Prabhupada, but they're winding up in trash cans, Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada thought very, very deeply about the matter. He said, it is Kali Yuga. What can we say? What can we do? What can we say? They throw their babies in trash cans. Oh my God, when we heard Srila Prabhupada's comment on that yes, we should keep distributing books. No doubt about it. And even if they throw them in trash cans, we would work streetlights and give out back to Godheads, hundreds, thousands. I believe at that time we were distributing at least 100,000 back to Godheads every month, just to Radha Damodar party. And yes, sometimes they would wind up on streets that people would look at it and throw it out. And we would run over, and of course we would pick it up. But Prabhupada said he used the term warfare. He said, in wartime, you fire bullets like anything. You drop bombs like anything. He said, most miss the enemy. That's not the criteria. So in the same way, he said, we're pushing out books like anything, but some books will hit the target. And we hear those Sankirtan stories. When they read the Sankirtan stories at the BBT Sir Prabhu, unfortunately, he's no longer with us. We miss his association deeply and dearly. He was also on Radha Damodar Traveling Sankirtan Party and was trying to train me up in the airports. We had two parties. We had one party for the lots and one party for the airports. So I was used to the lots and dealing with people in the lots, but the airport was a whole different consciousness. But anyway, he would read these letters that people would send in. They would write. It was just, you thought he would be making them up. Oh, thank you. This book has changed my life. It's pierced my heart. It's wonderful, etc. I'm chanting 16 rounds. I'm offering all of my food. The effect is definitely there. I traveled with His Holiness. I had the opportunity of traveling with His Holiness. At the time was Ganesham Prabhu, Bhaktitirtha Swami. I got to spend time with His Holiness Kavi Chandra Swami, Tripurari Swami, many stalwart preachers. It was just a very, very wonderful experience. And I wrote so many notes. Now I'm just starting to look at some of my.
A good
some of my
segue
notes.
to Kavichandra
I
Maharaj,
think
the next speaker, Kavichandra Maharaj. So thank you for mentioning him. So probably we'll hear more from you, but we'll let the other speakers finish their slots and then you can come back on again and say more.
Okay.
We'd like, and of course,
Okay.
we're going to be continuing this program over a long period of time so that, you know, all of your statements can be recorded. But this is just priceless. All the information you're giving us is just priceless. The
Well,
Leela
thank
is
you.
just amazing, amazing Leela. Thank you so very much.
for the encouragement.
Thank you so very much. And now I'll introduce His Holiness Kavichandra Maharaj. Maharaj, you're in the program. I see you here. And you might unmute, Maharaj. All right, so just to introduce Kavichandra Maharaj, His Holiness Kavichandra Maharaj met the Hare Krishna devotees in 1967 and was initiated by Srila Prabhupada in 1971. He joined the temple in Tucson, Arizona, and since that time, he has served in various capacities in the United States and around the world. Some of these services include, from 1973 until 1977, itinerant selling of Srila Prabhupada's books to libraries, universities, and individuals, including leading a book distribution team called the Radha Damodar Sankirtan Party, preaching Krishna consciousness in Fiji, filling in as the general manager for the Radha Rasa Bihari Temple in Juhu, India, and as the temple president in Tokyo, Japan. In Japan, in 1982, His Holiness Kavichandra Maharaj took his sannyas vows, lifelong celibacy, and a vow to fully serve his spiritual teacher with mind, body, and words. 5 years later, in 1987, Maharaj started to serve as a GBC member for Japan. Gradually, his GBC responsibilities expanded from Japan to culturally diverse places such as Thailand, Indochina, Indonesia, Greece, and West Africa. His Holiness Kavichandra Maharaj is also a committee member of the GBC Executive Committee, ISKCON Law Committee, and Revision Committee. His Holiness Kavichandra Maharaj has a special interest in book distribution and Harinam Sankirtan, and he writes of his faith in Srila Prabhupada on the topic of Harinam. He invests time in devotee care by writing articles, participating in conferences, and vigorously encouraging others to put an effort into making it a priority. As a traveling preacher and the initiating spiritual master of many disciples in his GBC region and beyond, he naturally sees the whole world as his family. He does have biological family members as well, a daughter, Mona Aing, and her two daughters, Grace and Faith, who regularly attend temple functions in Los Angeles. Welcome, Kavichandra Maharaj. Please speak.
Just a minute, I'm going to switch on my phone here. Om Gana Timirandasya Ganangana Shalakaya Chaksuramilitanyena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Padamayam Dadati Swa Padantikam. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namane. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharini Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desasana.
Sculpture much. Might have lost him in the last meeting that we had.
Krishna Bhavane Bhyo Vaishnave
Wonderful.
Yo Namaha.
Right.
Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagat Pate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye. Okay, well, Radha Damodar. Of course, originally we know Vishnu John took the deities, kind of just took them from New Vrindavan, that's what I heard, and started, traveling on the bus with them. And it was a nice party, but he went to different festivals and different places, and he had a small kirtan group and a few book distributors traveling. And I used to meet him here and there when I was on traveling Sankirtan and be in the same place once in a while. But then when Tamal Krishnaraj came from India and they got together, they were old friends, and he said, Vishnu John, this is really small time. And, you're not making devotees. And so he started really trying to make devotees. And the first time they were in Berkeley, and in 1 month, they made something like 17 devotees. Those were the hippie days, And that's how it got started. Then they started traveling and collecting, and then many were coming from different temples. And I remember somehow or other he wanted to expand, so he tried to gather up different so-called leaders. And I was one of them. And I really, had in my mind thought, I'll never do anything but book distribution. And, I don't want to be a manager or anything like that, but he really pushed, and we got in there, and then we had that big festival in Chicago with the 5 new buses and installing the Gaur-Nitai deities and a big initiation of all the devotees he'd been making. He'd been saving up to get somewhere, had been quite some time on the party, some were brand new, but he wanted to present results to Prabhupada. So that was a big event. And Tamal Krishnaraj had his way of training us up. So he gave me a very broken down bus. All the buses were very old, and after the Greyhound or the whoever company, that was becoming too costly to use them because they were always breaking down. So those were the buses they were buying, and then they would try to fix them up as much as possible. And So it was, and I had a party of men that had not been doing very good anywhere else. And the driver, who was the mechanic, his only goal in life was to get off that bus and get away. So he was not so enthusiastic. But so we, and fortunately, just Adunamar was kind enough to give me an amplifier and some kind of speaker. So, because we were supposed to do Harinam at college programs. And that was the idea in the beginning, to go to the college, do Harinam, and get some preaching engagement. Somebody was supposed to be going ahead and trying to arrange like classroom preaching, but I didn't have very good people to do that. It wasn't going on very nicely. But then I think I started to tell this before when we kept getting cut off. We were in San Francisco, and I was there with Tripurari's party, and we were addressing the deities every night. And one night I went in and nobody was there, only me. So I did it myself. And then I found out after that, they had been meeting with Prabhupada, Tripurari, and Tamal Krishnamurti was there with all his new men, and they were all offering flowers and all freshly shaved up, something like 17 new brahmacharis. But Prabhupada wasn't paying much attention to that. And then he called Tripurari in, and he just asked him about book distribution, and all he wanted to hear about was the book distribution. So that's when Tamal Krishnamurti thought, he's got to really get it, book distribution. And, being competitive as he was. So he found a devotee named Yogesh Chandra, who had been a big Sankirtan leader from the early days in San Francisco, but he had left, got him back, and got him to train up these new men. And what they did was just sell one pack of incense at $1 and give one back to Godhead. So they became very big back to Godhead distributors. But somehow along the line, I don't know if it was before this meeting or what, but realized, Prabhupada really liked a big book distribution. So he was thinking, how can we distribute big books? He's a brand new man, and, it's a little bit of an art. So he realized that, okay, let him sell 5 packs of incense, $5, and then you can give the Bhagavatam and skip to back to Godhead. So they started doing that. And it went pretty good. Devotees got really good at selling incense. Incense was not everywhere at the time like it is now. It wasn't in every shop and everything. There was spiritual sky incense, and devotees were making it. And so 5 for $3, things like that. And distributing a lot of back to Bhagavatams. Started actually beat Los Angeles. And Ramaswar was really upset and said, Prabhupada, they're not getting $5 for every book. And Prabhupada said, no, you have to do that. And then Tamal Krishna explained, that this would, if they tried to do that they had to get actually $5 for every book they gave out on each book, then they would reduce their back to everything so much. So Prabhupada said, no, so as long as you pay the BBT, no problem. So it carried on. I think the previous speaker was just mentioning there's one picture and you see everybody really laughing behind Prabhupada, big smiles. And that was when Jayatirtha had beat the LA had beat the Radha Damodar party. And Prabhupada said, tomorrow we'll have a heart attack because they were so competitive. So it was at wild times. When sometimes if a brahmachari wanted to join the party, they'd say, why do you don't want to join this like the Marines, they're like the Green Beret or something, and it was just no rest. We had the bus, it's supposed to be headquarters, but basically nobody was ever there on the bus, just the driver and the leader. And they would get the books, and then once in a while the vans would come and collect the books and go back out again, because they created this quota system. You have to do so much Sankirtan, you have to get so many dollars, and then depending on how much dollars and quotas and all this, you could distribute so many books. So it was very mode of passion. Later, Tamal Krishna Maharaj was saying, we created something very good, but it's not lasting. So different things happened. Buses were going here and there, but then somebody decided that they should have preaching centers, and so we made preaching centers in different places where there were no temples already. But still, the quota for book distribution was so big that nobody was staying at the preaching center except the pujari, and everybody was traveling. Everybody loved it. It was, that type of intensity, and there's still devotees like that, but that's just the ecstasy was there. That so many books were going out. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj was very personal. He was on his bus with Vishnu John, and I saw, like, during the marathon, and when Tamal Krishna Maharaj had been in India, where telephones hardly ever worked, and I remember even when I went to India and with him in 1978, when we were in Juhu, we could call America with some trouble, but we couldn't call downtown Bombay. Even the telephone system was so, undeveloped. So when he got to America, and he realized that, your telephones worked like anything. So he got really into using the telephone. And they had special, collect call system, could say, call this number and say, I want to make a collect call, and then they would accept it, and then, it would save money. But he personally, during the marathon, would talk to every book distributor one by one, and standing in the phone booth. There was no cell phone. You couldn't sit on the warm bus. Standing in the phone booth with the cold wind blowing on your feet, and talking on the telephone. Tamal would always he would always hold his, this thing over the telephone, trying to prevent germs or something. But he was so personal like that. He was talking to everybody and encouraging everyone. And he told me the first marathon, he said, the army runs on its stomach, got to cook really nice, cauliflower and potatoes and sour cream, and make sure everybody eats, and make sure everybody gets a lot of sleep. He said, this sounds funny, but make sure everybody gets good sleep. Because if you're going to work many, many hours a day, and like a lot of times we were in really cold weather, some of the buses were in places where the water system on the bus would freeze. So they would just go out in the snow and rub snow on their body for a bath. the cook would have to gather snow or something and melt it. But somehow or other, everybody, just kept going for some time. Like we said, it was hard to maintain that, because then he got bigger other assignments, New York Temple, and then a lot of devotees from the Radha Damodar party were assigned to go to New York, because that was something that needed a lot of help. So gradually it kind of faded out, but it was something wonderful and inspired devotees all over the world. The idea of deities traveling on the buses, and India took that up in a really big way. They're still doing that with traveling buses and deities, and distributing inconceivable amounts of books. So we were very fortunate to be. It wasn't easy getting trained by Tamal Krishna Maharaj. Sometimes it's very, very painful and difficult. Push to the, I think what Brahma Prabhu was saying, to the very limit, but then always he would be nice. But like, for me, I was not so clever, and they would say, you take this really big quota, and I would cry and say, no way, these guys, we can't collect that much money. They'd say, you don't have to collect it. We just want to tell people, that you took this really big quota, and that will inspire other people to take big quotas. And so then I would agree. But that meant that if you didn't get that big quota, and you couldn't distribute so many books. So one day we were in Kansas City, and it was a blizzard. I think every Americans know what a blizzard is. The wind was blowing sideways, and it was way below zero, and nobody was out anywhere. And if you got out of your car or out of your house, you couldn't stand still. The wind was so strong. This was for a few days, just ice, wind, snow blowing. And so we just couldn't do anything. And then our particular bus, we were really suffering. The driver forgot to fill up the gas tank for the heater. So we had no heat, and nobody could do anything. So, he said, what are you doing? He was saying, you stupid. We're all sitting here talking about what a failure you are. And I said, we're in a blizzard, He said, no, Adi Keshwas, and they're doing really good in the snow. They were in New York somewhere, and it snowed, and it was beautiful, fresh snow, and, nice weather. And people were really happy. Christmas season and snow coming. This was not snow on the ground. This was a blizzard, freezing cold blizzard. And he just kept saying, no, you rascal, you can't do it. Finally, he just said, I don't want to talk to you. Talk to Vishnu John. So Vishnu John came on, and he said, oh, Kavi, we just had the kirtan, and it was so ecstatic. We had to mop up the floor from the sweat, and he was so blissful. And I just forgot about all the chastisement. But that's how the party worked. They would go somewhere, and Tamal Krishna Maharaj would preach really strongly, and Vishnu John would have these incredible sweet kirtans, and then people would want to join, especially brahmacharis, the adventure, traveling, and just distributing books, not having to worry so much about all the other problems. So we had, at one point, it got very organized, 5 buses, and every bus had a few vans, and the number of total vans went way up of, devotees traveling and distributing books. And I had a devotee that It took care of all the vans. Everybody had to report about their oil changes and all the service they did on their van, and keeping up with everything and making sure everything was going all right, because it's not easy to maintain so many vehicles. But the buses were a real adventure. They were always breaking down, at least my bus. The bus I had was a really old one, and it didn't have, synchro mesh. Nowadays, I don't know if anybody knows what that is, but when you shift gears, normally you just push in the clutch and you just change gears and it'll automatically synchronize. So you can do that almost anytime you want. But this was really old, didn't have that. In order to change gears, we had to push in the clutch, put it in neutral, let out the clutch, and then get exactly 1500 RPM or something. I can't remember the number, but exact number of RPM, and then push in the clutch again, and then put it in the next gear to go, up to gears 1, 2, 3, 4. But sometimes it wouldn't even do that. It just gets stuck in second gear, something like that. So when I asked Fisher John, when I got on the bus, I said, do I have to know anything about the bus? And he said, yeah, you have to have basic, mechanical knowledge, because otherwise you're just victimized by your driver. Anything can happen. So that would happen, and we couldn't change the gear, even 2 or 3 devotees pushing on it. We couldn't get it out as second gear or something. So I pulled in one gas station, and that was in Tennessee in the Sunday. And the gas station, I don't know if it was even open. At least the mechanic was off duty. The mechanic came out. He had his shiny cowboy boots on, and he was all dressed up, for Sunday. And he said, I'm not going to do anything, no way. And I begged him, and finally he took it for really big money. And he opened up the back of the bus there where the engine was and the gears, and he just leaned back and he just kicked it like a karate kick. He kicked the link, and it somehow knocked it out, knocked it into place so we could go on. So then I knew that trick. So afterward, I just do that myself. So it was like that. Fortunately, we got Hasyagrami on the bus after a while, and Hasyagrami knew, he'd been on traveling for a long time, and he knew the tricks. But they're always breaking down, and we'd have to go only to some junkyard, and so I can't remember, somewhere in Louisiana or something. And the driver would have to spend a day or two searching around this junkyard to find a generator or something for such an old vehicle. They weren't so common to find the parts even. You couldn't find them just anywhere. So that was, a real adventure too. And we were also cooking on the bus while we're driving, 70 miles an hour, cooking, and many crazy things we were doing, dressing the deities while we're driving down the road. So many things, because it was just such a rush. I heard one time, I wasn't there, but Tamal Krishna, they pulled up alongside the van that was driving also, and they just handed the prasadam across, while they're driving. So nobody would have to stop their, efforts. But everybody got, really enlivened, but I won't go into all the details of other things that went wrong, but it was very, very competitive. But we were on a marathon all year long. It was really hard to really do much to increase in December. So Los Angeles, who had, an unlimited human resources in the marathon, when they get everybody going out, they could actually do more books. And Tamal Krishna would try everything to beat them, But so it was something really amazing. Personally, it wasn't easy. Constantly being, what about this? Have you done this? Have you given this report? Have you done that? Have you done that? Why isn't this guy doing, his quota, which was way over his head? And, many things like that. But this made, some kind of lessons of attention to detail. And also, learning to tolerate, because when we get out on our own and we're trying to preach, like I experienced later, you find a lot of uncooperative people, a lot of trouble, a lot of places where devotees don't, you have trouble. But it was nothing compared to the training we got from His Grace, His Holiness Tamal Krishna Goswami. And it was very pleasing to Prabhupada because so many books were being distributed and it was getting spread. Prabhupada liked the idea. He financed the buses, from the BBT funds, gave loans, gave grants. So they would research and find some really old bus and try to renovate it as much as possible. Build in the altar, build in the shower and kitchen and all those things. So it was pretty nice. And I know the first time I traveled on the bus, I was in San Francisco. That's where they brought me in to join. First night, got arrested for distribution. But they got out, I guess, the next morning, and they bailed us out. And then we traveled, and night came, and I was thinking, well, what are we going to do now? And he just said, well, Tamal Krishna lay down in front, he got his sleeping bag and lay down in front of Radha Damodar. The altar was closed, of course. And he said, you lie down also, but put your feet by my head and your head by my feet. And so we were packed in there like sardines, alternating like that so we could fit more in, see, because the shoulders are a little wide. So, you don't have shoulder to shoulder, otherwise it takes more space. So it was like that, no stopping. Just stopping at, very quickly at some place for the restroom at the gas station or something, and just keep moving. So we went to Denver. I think Brahma Prabhu joined at the same time. And he put us in charge of straightening out the accounts from the Radha Damodar bus. And it was a really huge mess, really hard to do. And we were not very experienced at that either. And Prabhupada was there, and Prabhupada had a darshan, and we didn't even know it. He told us later, oh, if I had known Prabhupada was going to do that, I would have told you. But those kind of things were going on. But then when I had my own bus, I was constantly being pushed at where's your accounts? And I could never get it right until finally I got a devotee named Madhukanta. And he was expert. He just looked at the accounts and fixed it up in a couple of minutes, made everything balance, because he was an accountant. So a special mercy. By that time, we weren't doing anything but book distribution. In the beginning, like I said, we were supposed to do these college programs and chant on the campus and, like Vishnu John had been doing, but we didn't have that kind of musicians to really do that very effectively. But then that push for book distribution kept going up and up and up because Prabhupada was so happy to hear about book distribution. So gradually, that's all we did. We just, we had different areas of the country, and we just, the parties would be out traveling, sometimes like, freezing cold, whatever, different conditions. And somehow or other, millions of books were distributed, and devotees got enlivened, also got disturbed, some temples, because the brahmacharis would want to join that party was more exciting, more adventurous. But that was all right in the long run. So I don't know what else to say. If anybody has any.
Thank you, Maharaj. We have one more speaker, and then we'll open it up for the audience, Maharaj.
Okay.
Thank you so very
Who's speaking next?
much. His Grace Prahlad Priya Prabhu.
Okay, I just met him. All right, thank you very much. I'll mute and listen.
Thank you.
Okay. Haribol.
So, Prahlad Priya Prabhu, I saw you there.
Radha Damodar ki jai. And then,
Right.
see, I had the Radha Damodar bus after different things happened. And then we more or less stopped traveling. We had a preaching center in Louisiana and Louisville, Kentucky, and Cincinnati, but we couldn't maintain both of them. And then we heard that Kirtananda was planning to take Radha Damodar back. So that's when they moved him quickly to Gitanagari, even though they hadn't built the temple yet. They were planning that to be in the future, but all of a sudden, Radha Damodar went to Gitanagari, and someone, Gornatai, came to that center. All right, so we'll hear from Prahlad Priya. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Maharaj.
You got a big group.
Yes, it's nice group. So to introduce Prahlad Priya Prabhu, His Grace Prahlad Priya Prabhu first met Srila Prabhupada in 1975 at the Philadelphia Rath Yatra at 18 years of age. He had been associating with the devotees for about 6 months in Philadelphia. Prior to meeting His Divine Grace, he was introduced to His Holiness Tamal Krishna Goswami and His Holiness Vishnujan Swami on the bus in Philadelphia. In early December 1975, when he drove Damodar Prabhu, his friend, to Baltimore, he met His Holiness Tamal Krishna Goswami, His Holiness Vishnujan Swami, and His Holiness Gargamuni Swami in their office. After almost 3 hours of preaching, he had to join. On December 21st, 1975, he joined the bus party and stayed on the bus party until it disbanded. On July 19th, 1976, in New York at 340 West 55th Street, he was initiated. After the bus party, his first service there became running the first Govinda's restaurant, then creating mobile distribution prasad carts. With his godbrother, Sarvabhauma Prabhu, they had almost 50 carts on the streets of New York. After roughly 4 years, he partnered with Yogeshwar Prabhu and worked side by side with him on ISKCON's first children's book publishing company, and did that service for 15 plus years. They were blessed to publish Her Grace Yamuna Devi's cookbook, Lord Krishna's Cuisine, in 1988. As the years moved forward, he served in Philadelphia, Lake Huntington, Paris, San Diego, and Delaware before moving back to California 2 years ago with his second wife. They have 9 children combined and 11 grandchildren. Welcome, Prabhu. Please speak. Prahlad Prabhu. Seems like there might be some glitch. This video is on, and also, there you are. For some reason, we can't hear you, Prabhu. It could be something to do with your computer, because you are unmuted. No, it's still not able to hear you. what to do. Anybody with technical advice who can say what can be done here? Let me see if we can try the phone. Yeah.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes.
Prahlad Priya Prabhuji, can you check that in the mute section there is one up arrow, and then can you switch that?
Okay.
You need to select your microphone, Prabhu, if you are able to hear me.
Maybe you can get on the phone, right? Prabhu, can he?
Yes, he can dial in with the phone,
Right from the
Prabhuji.
phone. He can dial in from the phone.
Yeah.
Let's see if he can dial in. Okay.
Nitendra Prabhu, just give him a minute. He's trying to dial in from his phone.
Sure, very nice.
Very wonderful hearing from His Holiness Kavi Chandra Swami, all the different pastimes. It's interesting how devotees in the management saw the activities of the Radha Damodar party differently. I was always in a van, always on the road. So practically speaking, I had no clue, these other things were even going on. We had tunnel vision. As I said, we wanted to distribute more than 12 hours a day. And he reminded me how, we would sell incense for donations and then give a book. But sometimes we'd give a book directly, but very rarely. But somehow or other, the books went out. So that was saving grace.
So what we might do, Shivi Prabhu, it's okay, we'll start some, here we go. Hopefully, no. Still not able to hear. I think what we might have to do, Shivi Prabhu, is see if we can bring Prahlad Prabhu on the next call, maybe test it out, and then.
Let me, I'll call and check with him, Prabhu.
Yeah, if during the call, if he can come on at any time, he can come on, but otherwise, what we'll do now is that we'll ask from the audience, anybody who'd like to ask questions or say things to continue anyway to start so that we save time that way. So if there's anybody who, while Prahlad Prabhu is trying to join in, and when he does join in, we'll bring him right on as soon as he comes on. But right now he's unmuted, we have his camera on, but not able to hear him. Brahma Prabhu, he's also got his, he's unmuted and video on. Do you want to say something, Brahma Prabhu? Because
I wanted to say this when Kavi Chandra was on, but I didn't really get the opportunity. I just wanted to say something about Kavi Chandra and Tamal Krishna Maharaj.
Please, thank you.
Kavi Chandra in his last, in one of his last, or in his first, in the first meeting, he said that he never knew why Tamal Krishna Maharaj chose him. He was nothing like Tamal Krishna Maharaj. But I have a story. When after the Radha Damodar party dissolved, the leaders went to Bombay to work with Tamal Krishna Maharaj in Bombay. So Janardhan and I was a life membership director. Janardhan was the Sankirtan leader, and Kavi Chandra was a general manager of some sort. So one day, Tamal Krishna Maharaj calls Janardhan and I in, and he decides to give us a talk. He says, there's a problem with you two. And so we said, well, what's that? He says, you're doing your work all right. He says, but the problem is you're too American. And so Janardhan and I, we looked at each other and, well, what do you mean we're too American? How are we too American? He said, you're just too American. You're too gregarious. You're too jokey. You're just too American. He says, you have to be more, you're in India now. You have to carry yourself differently. You have to be more Hindu. So we kind of looked at each other and said, what do you mean we have to be more Hindu? I don't understand. And he said, you should be more like Kavi Chandra. So we said, more like Kavi Chandra, and so that just wasn't exactly us. He said, no, you should be more like Kavi Chandra. He carries himself in such a way like a sadhu, and he's people can relate to him more. Indians can relate to him more than they can to you because you guys are too American. So after that, we had a different kind of like appreciation for Kavi Chandra, and we watched him, to try to figure out like how to be more Hindu, So I just thought that was an interesting thing to show how much that although Tamal Krishna Maharaj, you didn't really understand sometimes that he appreciated you. Ultimately, he may have been on our case a lot, but he would say something like, you got to be more like Kavi Chandra. And maybe Kavi Chandra never knew this, but that actually happened.
I never knew it for sure. That's
Did you hear that? Did you know that?
Nope.
Janardhan he's here. He'll bear this out.
Go.
You remember that? You remember that? How how Tamal said we had to be more like Kavi Chandra? Oh, he's shaking his head anyway. Okay.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Oh, I made it somehow, miraculously.
Okay.
Vaishnakalpa Turubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyeva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So I'm holding my phone in my hand, so forgive the and forth. I am so excited to be on this call. I can't even begin to tell you. I'm going to try and cut right to the chase here. In 1972, I was in Philadelphia walking up the street, and devotees were doing a kirtan. I believe it was my first year of high school or something. And as we walked by, I remember saying to my friend that I was with, let me try and set this here. Is that okay?
Yes, it's perfect.
Okay. So I said to my friend, gee, I want whatever drugs they're taking. I mean, you see these guys? And, we walked by and they handed me a BTG. I walked about 10 paces and I threw the BTG in the garbage. I walked another 10 paces and realized that was just not right what I did. So I walked back to the garbage can. I took the BTG out of the can and I stopped a stranger and said, hey, buddy, this is from these guys over here. And I handed him the BTG. So that was my first experience. I had sort of a twisted introduction to Krishna consciousness because we grew up in a tough area and there were a lot of thugs, if you will. And I really had trouble taking it seriously, but I agreed finally to go to the 1975 Rath Yatra. And those of you who are on the call, after at my wife's home in Conshohocken, they hosted all the devotees in the bus party at their home. So she met Srila Prabhupada the same day I did. And I had told the devotees, I'll go, but I won't bow down to anyone. So I went, and my dear friend was driving Srila Prabhupada. He opened the door, and Prabhupada was probably maybe 20 yards away. And I stood, everyone else went down to the ground, and Srila Prabhupada looked in my direction. And he was looking so intensely that I thought, who is he staring at? So I looked behind me, and there was no one behind me. So the next thing I know, I was down on the ground offering obeisances. And I didn't know how long I was supposed to stay down or what. And I glanced out of the corner of my eye, and Srila Prabhupada was walking on the blacktop, and he sort of snapped his cane on the ground. And I looked up, and he gave me a look like, okay, now you got it. So I listened to the class, and my heart started to melt, but I really wasn't so convinced. Shortly afterwards, I was told that His Holiness Tamal Krishna Maharaj and Vishnu Jan Maharaj were going to be there. So they invited me on the bus, and they preached to me. And my first experience with Goswami was, as I was driving home that day, I saw a funeral, and there were massive flowers, gigantic flower arrangements everywhere. So I got the brilliant idea that these flowers shouldn't be for a dead person, but they should be for Krishna. So I loaded up my van, and I was so proud of myself. And I drove back the next morning. I think it took 4 people to unload all the flowers. Goswami called me onto the bus. Bhakta Phil, how much did you pay for these flowers? I said, oh, Krishna provided them. He said, what does that mean? I said, well, we took them from a funeral. So needless to say, he chastised me and told me that's not what we do. And that was sort of my first experience. We had about 10 or 12 friends that became interested at the same time. So we actually set up a little temple room. We had a devotee, Chaitanya Balaba, who had left the temple and moved in with us. So we were associating like that. And one day I got a phone call from a friend of mine, childhood friend, Bhakta Dave. And he said, I want to join the bus party. And I was shocked because the first time I brought him to the temple, he literally stood with his back against the wall, terrified. And I just didn't understand. But he said, you know, the bus party's in Baltimore. Will you drive me down? Absolutely. So we drive down. Vishnu Jan Maharaj says to me, can you shave him up? I said, Maharaj, I'm barely old enough to shave myself. I'm not sure it's a good idea. He said, no, take him and shave him up. So we come back, and poor Damodar has, 10 or 20 nicks on his head, toilet paper stuck everywhere from bleeding. And Vishnu Jan said to me, Bhakta Phil, you're a demon. And I said, Maharaj, I've been trying to tell you that. I wish you would have been paying attention. So I knew at that point I had to get out of there. And I started to head for the door. It's probably 8 o'clock at night. And I was about 3 steps from the doorway, and I heard, Bhakta Phil, please come to Tamal Krishna Maharaj's office. So I thought, I have 2 choices here. I can go or I can leave. I said, but it would be pretty rude for me to leave and walk out of here. So I decided to go up, and it was Vishnu Jan Maharaj, Tamal Krishna Maharaj, and Gargamuni Swami. Now, at this time, I had been convinced enough, and 10 of us decided we would all go to Coconut Grove and join. I had a marriage planned for the following month. I had a full scholarship to Musical Academy. So basically, I went up, and they began to preach. And I had so many arguments. We all know how that works. I began sitting up in a yoga position. I ended up then I wound up back on my elbows. Then I was laying flat on my back. Long story short, Goswami convinced me to go home, get rid of all my possessions, cancel my wedding, send my future wife to Coconut Grove under Abhiram's care, and join the bus. But I told him I needed 2 weeks. And he said, no, I don't think that's a good idea. I think if I give you that time, you'll never come back. So I said, if I promise you, you're a sannyas. If I give you my word, I'll keep it. So every morning for that 2 weeks, needless to say, I won't get into how ugly it was, convincing my fiance that I wasn't going to marry her until she was trained and that this was the program. I basically would get up in the morning and the phone would ring. Dr. Phil, how many rounds do you have done? 8, Maharaj. Call me when you have 16. So I'd call back in an hour. And then he would put Vishnu Jan Maharaj on the phone. And Vishnu Jan Maharaj would sing bhajans to me. So at the end of that 2 weeks, I decided, now it's time. And December 21st, I joined. And one of the first experiences I had, and Janardhan Prabhu, forgive me, I don't have your sannyas name. I don't have the screen. I'm terribly excited to see you, by the way. It was Christmas Eve, and Vishnu Jan Maharaj kept me back and said, you can cook with me, because he could tell I was fragile. I really didn't think I could do this devotional life. And I made that clear to them. I said, I gave you my word, 6 months, and I'll do that. So he cooked strawberry malpur, lemonade. And at the time I was macrobiotic. I had been vegetarian then for many years. I was about 15. And at the time I was avoiding sugar and so many things. So they had a gold-plated glubjaman and a silver-plated glubjaman. And Tamal Krishna made the announcement. So we have a new boy here. His name is Bhakta Phil. And he was one of my greatest conquests. It took me forever to convince him. And to be honest with you, I never thought he'd come back. So he said, so I'd like to give him this glubjaman. And I said, no, thank you, Goswami. I limit my sugar. Well, everyone on the bus went crazy. I'll take it, Maharaj. I'll take it. Give it to me. Give it to me. So I looked around and I realized, okay, first mistake. And then I accepted it. I went to take a bite and he said, no, you have to put the whole thing in your mouth. And so that's basically how I joined. And I'm going to try and recall a couple of special experiences on the bus. I really, Janardhan will be able to confirm this. They called me Philly Phil. And the reason they called me Philly Phil was not only because I was from Philadelphia, but because I had a wife waiting for me. So I got teased a lot like that. And one night, this directly has to do with Janardhan. One night, I was awakened in the middle of the night, someone shaking me. And as everyone mentioned, we slept like sardines. If one person rolled to the side, just about everybody did eventually. And he said, wake up, Dr. Phil, wake up. And I was kind of freaked out. And I said, why are you waking me up? He said, you're going to wake up the whole bus. He said, you're screaming in your dream, Jai Srila Prabhupada, Jai Srila Prabhupada. that was one of my memories. And then shortly after being on the bus, Bhakta James, who became Virkeshwar Pandit, had just been initiated. And Vishnu Jan Maharaj knew I had a musical background. He said, are you comfortable with the morning prayer? I said, yes, Maharaj. So he handed me kartals and he said, okay, you lead. And it was Virkeshwar Pandit's first arti for Radha Damodar. He had never performed arti before, to the best of my recollection. So he hands the kartals and I begin, and I'm starting to get warmed up and I'm so excited. And suddenly my kartals broke. The string snapped and I felt something kind of hit me in the head, but I ignored it. Vishnu Jan Maharaj is looking at me and he's motioning, stop the kirtan and get off the bus. So I was stunned. I was in shock because I thought my kirtan is so bad that he's throwing me off the bus. I was totally freaked out. And I sort of tried to ignore him thinking, well, I'm not going to stop. I'm just getting warmed up here. And he put his hand on my shoulder and whispered in my ear, leave the bus. So as I was leaving the bus, I remember putting my head in my hands like this. And I looked and there was blood streaming down my face. The cartel had cut me. I actually still have a scar from the cartel. And that's why he asked me to leave the bus. It was because then he explained to me that it was impure, that there would be bleeding and so forth on the bus. I, for one, have to tell you, and I don't know if I've really ever admitted this to anyone, but Sankirtan was not for me. I tried like anything. I couldn't take the rejection, and there was a lot of rejection. And so I'm going to say something that I've told maybe one or two people in my life. Before I left, I knew that the boys on the bus had a quota. And I knew that it was really difficult for me to distribute. I just couldn't take the rejection. So I took a couple $1,000s and put it in my bag. And I would go out and I would distribute. And if I wasn't having any success, I would come back and take $100 bill out and say, here, I met my quota. And now that I think back about it, it was not only sneaky, but it was, it was just what it was. Vishnu John Maharaj once said to me, there's no second initiates here. I need you to help carry Radha Damodar. And I said, not a problem. And Vishnu John Maharaj is much taller than I am. So we took Radha Damodar and he said, be very, very careful. And I was really worried, that I would do something stupid because that's my nature. And as we started to get toward the front of the bus, the deities became really heavy. And I remember thinking, if I let go of this handle, my devotional life is over. It's finished. And we got out of the bus. We managed to get through the door, and suddenly Radha Damodar became much lighter. And I remember that experience, and I believe that's when I began to understand that the Lord can do whatever he likes. Many years later, it wasn't many years later. I'm going to backtrack a little. We ended up in New York. And I remember saying to Vishnu John Maharaj, and Tamal Krishna Maharaj handled me pretty much with baby gloves. I think he knew that that I might leave. But I remember saying to Vishnu John, and the arrangement, by the way, with Tamal Krishna Maharaj was, you come on the bus, give me 6 months. And of course, there was, you'll play instruments, you'll sing and dance. That might have happened twice. The rest of the time we were on the parking lots. But he said, at the end of that 6 months, Tamal Krishna Maharaj said this, I will personally fly your wife up and have you married. Well, I didn't believe him. So we ended up in New York. And the last conversation I had with Vishnu John Maharaj, I said to Maharaj, I don't know if I'll be here when you get back. I said, I don't think I'm cut out for this. I really don't think I can do this. And he said, Bhakta Phil, you're coming around to your 6-month blues. He said, and then you get the 1-year blues. He said, I'm coming around to my 6-year blues. And at the time I thought, he's just trying to encourage me. And then I said to him, well, I really hope I'm here when you get back. And he looked me in the eye and he said, Dr. Phil, I will see you in the next day of Brahma. Now, being so young, so neophyte, not having any clue what that meant, in retrospect, you can draw your own conclusions. And unfortunately, I couldn't get into my storage. I have many pictures and things which I'd love to share. But later, 1977, I was in Mayapur when they released the list of the 11 gurus. And this boy, Bhakta Dev, that I told you about, he had been kidnapped by Ted Patrick. So one night, I'm regressing a bit. One night, 6 months in, I'm in the New York Temple, and everyone was in Coconut Grove. And I decided, okay, enough of this. I'm not even going to ask Goswami about marriage because I really just didn't think he wanted me to get married. I know he didn't want me to get married. So I snuck out. I left the temple that night and I took a bus to Philadelphia to my parents' house. When I got there, I decided to try and call Bhakta Dave's house, and his parents answered. And I couldn't say it was me because they blamed me for him becoming a devotee. And he got on the phone, and it turned out he had just gotten away from this Ted Patrick guy. So I said, you have to come right away. Everybody's been in such anxiety because you got kidnapped. So we called the temple, and Sri Lokeshwar answered. I said, it's me, it's Bhakta Phil. I need to talk to Goswami. And Goswami, I handed the phone. Actually, I had him call, and I said, please don't tell him you're with me. I said, because he's going to really give me the sauce for leaving. I have a ticket to go to Coconut Grove. I'm going to go down there. And I could hear him, Bhakta Dave, I'm so happy to hear your voice. We were so worried about you. Where are you? He said, I'm in Philadelphia, Goswami. He said, you're with Bhakta Phil. And he just handed me the phone. And Goswami said, Bhakta Phil, what have you done? You've left me like a prostitute in the middle of the night. And I said, well, Maharaj, I didn't think you were actually going to fly my wife up and get us married. He said, I want you back here in the morning. And sure enough, that's exactly what he did. But getting back to that, a year or so later, in Mayapur, they handed out the sheets describing how they were going to move forward in our movement. And Damodar Das, Bhakta Dev, came back after Prabhupada left. He was one of Tamal Krishna Maharaj's very first disciples. He came to find me and he said, they need somebody they can trust to serve prasadam. So I went in and it was just Damodar and myself, and Goswami proceeded to get up and give me an introduction in front of the 11 men. And he described, this was my greatest conquest. This boy had so many reasons why he couldn't join. During that meeting, the first night, I said to Maharaj, I think I'm better on the outside. You know, I've already made 10 devotees. And he laughed and he looked at Gargamuni. He said, can you believe how arrogant he is? He said, he can't even make himself a devotee. And he's trying to tell me he made other devotees. So for many years to come, it was sort of the running joke how he really felt that I would not be back and wouldn't keep my word. So one of the things that happened in New York, and I threw this in, I was a trumpet player. As I mentioned, I had a full scholarship. And someone found out that I played the horn. So Srila Prabhupada was coming to New York. We all went to the airport. And Adi Keshava, Maharaj at the time, Adi Keshava gave me a long bugle with flags hanging down. And he said, I want you to stand at the bottom of the escalator. And when Srila Prabhupada appears, I want you to blow these bugle calls. So I just did what I was told. And I'm standing there. And Prabhupada's halfway down the escalator and gives me this really sour look. Like, you know, the feeling I got was that he was thinking, what are these boys doing? You know, what are they thinking? So I lowered the horn, and the minute Srila Prabhupada passed me, I began to weep uncontrollably. And I was really embarrassed because I didn't understand what was happening. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't stop crying. Later, I spoke to Brahmananda. And of course, he was famous for losing his stuff in front of Prabhupada. And he explained to me that that is not a bad thing. Because Goswami would do things, we'd be on the back staircase in New York and I'd be singing. I remember Uttama Shloka came and he had this very fancy kirtan. And I was kind of in the back, just walking down the back stairwell. And I'm singing, Sri Guru Charana. Who is that? I hear. It's Prahlada Priya Goswami, Sahaja. I said, Maharaj, I didn't think anyone was listening, and I was just trying to imitate Uttama Shlok. So I'm not sure how much time there is. I can honestly say that had Goswami and Vishnu Jan Maharaj not taking the time that they did to batter me, when I left the temple that first night, after they convinced me, it was freezing outside. I literally crawled into the back of my car and cried myself to sleep because I couldn't believe that I just agreed to surrender to Krishna. I woke up in a daze and I thought maybe this was a dream. Maybe this really didn't happen. Of course, it did happen. And for that, I am eternally grateful. And, I can't even express my gratitude. Vishnu Jan Maharaj treated me like a little brother. We had many experiences in the morning where I was a bit of a clown, still am, but I would begin to make him laugh and we would start laughing. And there were several mornings where he'd tell me, off the bus, we have to do japa. And we had a wonderful time. It was a great austerity. Looking back, I just wish I could have understood how profound, historically, personally, socially, how profound that time was, and how much service these devotees were doing. Some years later, because I considered myself, as I still do, a junior devotee. I came in just toward the end. And I remember it was probably the mid-'80s. I was taking a nap and suddenly I was with Srila Prabhupada. He was in a rocking chair and I was sitting down by his side. And he asked me, why are you so despondent? And I began to cry. And I said, Srila Prabhupada, you have so many disciples. You've given so many instructions. They've done this extraordinary service. And I don't even feel like I'm a disciple. I don't feel like I should even call myself a disciple. And I ended up weeping again. And Prabhupada lifted me up, put my head on his shoulder. And I remember in the dream thinking, here I am committing another offense. I'm soiling my spiritual master's cloth. And held my head and said, no, you are also my disciple. And I said, can you give me an instruction, Srila Prabhupada? He sat back and he said, yes, everyone you meet, you shall tell them who is Krishna. Just like that. Who is Krishna? And I remember waking up and actually feeling that I had been held by Srila Prabhupada. From that moment forward, back in the day, many of you know, you were in or you were out. And even though I left the temple and got my own apartment, I was always associating with devotees. It was many years later that things began to reform and devotees became a little more open-hearted. But during that time, you were in or you were out. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj, when Srila Prabhupada, I know I'm jumping around a little. I have some notes. I'm just trying to use up my time wisely. Srila Prabhupada came to New York and we had the posters printed of the Rath Yatra. And it was our job to go out from midnight until daylight and put these posters up everywhere in New York. Tosan Krishna, myself, Vaikuntha, and Jivadar, I believe. And this one morning we came back and I had gotten the bright idea that because we would have to do a loop, by the time we would put the posters up and go back around, other Broadway people would come and their posters would be on top of ours. So we'd either peel them off or whatever. So that morning, I decided to shimmy up the poles on Fifth Avenue and staple these posters back to back. And we're walking back in the temple, and obviously the sea has parted. Srila Prabhupada's coming out of the temple. We have glue all over us and buckets and brushes, and we look burned out. And I saw Srila Prabhupada lean over and ask his bodyguard a question. That day, his bodyguard came to the restaurant and I was running the restaurant at the time, said to me, come up afterwards. I have a message for you from Prabhupada. And I was just blown away because I never had the courage to speak in front of Prabhupada. I never had the courage to say a word. I just sat and listened. And I went up to the 11th floor, the doors opened, and he came out with Srila Prabhupada's shoes. And I said, can I have them? He said, no, you can't have them. You can put your hands in them and take the dust. And he brought me Srila Prabhupada's Maha. And he said, this morning when you boys were walking up, Prabhupada said, what are these boys doing? Why do they look like that? And he said, well, they're putting posters up. Well, they had just they were on their way to take Srila Prabhupada on a tour down Fifth Avenue to show him the route. And when Srila Prabhupada saw the posters, he said, these are the boys you're speaking of. He said, you please tell them. I said, thank you very much. And to me, that it meant the world. Now, I don't know, where are we with time?
We're pretty much a few more minutes for you left, but
okay, all right. All I can say is that it is by the grace of Srila Prabhupada's disciples. Obviously, it goes without saying that it's by the grace of Srila Prabhupada ultimately. But I took shelter of Goswami, Vishnu Jan, the sannyasis, as though they were Srila Prabhupada. That was my connection. And for years and years to come, I would go out of my way to spend time at Jamuna, Brahmananda. You know, I go down a long list and try and pick their brains. And there's so many wonderful stories. But what I want to say in conclusion, it is literally by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada's devotees that I have been bestowed with the blessings. And whenever someone says to me, well, ISKCON's this, ISKCON's that, and I'm making devotees, blah, 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 I think if they simply take shelter of Srila Prabhupada and his books and the devotees, the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord, there's no way you can fail. There's no way you can fail. And Vishnu Jan Maharaj once said to me, I said, Maharaj, I'm a pretender. I just fake. I said, I don't think I can do this. And he looked at me and he smiled and he said, do what I do, Bhakta Phil. Fake it till you make it. And I never forgot that. I never forgot that. And actually, I refused to get initiated. And it was by the grace of Bhagavat Prabhu. And I'll end on this. I wasn't shaved up and I was telling devotees, I can't take these vows. Everyone's telling me that Srila Prabhupada's ill because we're committing offenses. Devotees are falling down. And Bhagavat said, 3 other devotees had spoken to me, but Bhagavat sat with me and he said, Bhakta Phil, do you think Srila Prabhupada knows your heart? And I said, yes, I believe so. He said, do you think he knows your mind? I said, unfortunately, I believe he does. He said, you grow up with a bunch of thugs. He said, I know some of these guys. I see them coming. He said, if you don't go in that room and take initiation, you will always be one of these guys that say, well, I didn't take any vows. It really doesn't matter what I do. He said, but if you do, not a day of your life will go by where you do not remind yourself that you took these vows to your Guru Maharaj, and that will keep you. And here we are 45 years later, so many ups, so many downs. I owe my life to all of you. Brahmadas, Janardhan, too many to mention. I owe my life to all of you because without your association, kindness, love, caring, hot sauce, sweet sauce, I don't know what my life would be. So I just want to thank anyone here who's listening, and also just beg your forgiveness if I've spoken anything that's inappropriate. I have so many stories, but hopefully that will just have to do for now. And I thank you for the honor If I can dig up some of these personal photographs. Oh, would it be okay if I grab something to show you? This is directly related. Actually, I completely forgot. This is nectar. When I'll give you the backstory real quick. When Damodar Das took initiation from Tamal Krishna, he said, well, now I must give you some dakshin. Goswami said this to Damodar. And Damodar said, okay. He said, it's traditional. So I'm getting it. I have it in my hands. Hang on. I'm just going to go somewhere where there's a little bit of light. Okay. So I'm going to have to turn this. Can everyone see this?
Yes.
Okay. It is a saffron hanky. The handkerchief was given to me by Yamuna Devi. And I'm going to sit down and see if I can flip the camera. The handkerchief was given to me by Yamuna Devi after I did, Yogeshwar and I did her cookbook. And she had wiped a tear away from Srila Prabhupada's eye. And there's a little teardrop stain here. And as you can see, there's a little description, because this flute, Goswami gave this flute, Srila Prabhupada gave this flute to Goswami at his sannyas initiation and said, I'd like to give this to you. This is the flute from my childhood deities.
Wow.
Then in turn, Goswami gave it to Damodar. He said, you're one of my first disciples. I know you longer than most. So I want you to have this. And because Damodar traveled as his personal servant for years to come, he said, Prahlad, listen, you brought me to the temple. I want you to have this. So these two particular things, this handkerchief used to wipe Srila Prabhupada's tear from his eye in his last departing month, and this flute that belonged to Srila Prabhupada's childhood deities, are some of my most cherished possessions. And with that, I will just thank everyone. And thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Jai, Prahlad Priya Prabhu, we are way beyond fortunate having your association and the association of all the wonderful devotees from the Radha Damodar Traveling Sankirtan Party, some of whom are right now with us. And so I'll just open up the program for others to ask questions or say things, because we've been mentioning each other, and I'm sure each of you have something to say about it. This program is going to continue for some time. At this time, we're really looking forward to whatever contributions can be made by yourselves, those of you who are in the Traveling Sankirtan Party. And question and answers can wait for other sessions as well, because it's really priceless that we're able to get this from you at this time, because most of these things were unheard of in terms of being recorded in this manner, that we can in the future come out with books and articles and all different types of media that would allow people in the future, hundreds of years from now, thousands of years from now, to see and witness what you just described as unprecedented history, unprecedented Leela of the beginnings of the Hare Krishna movement that Srila Prabhupada so wonderfully gave us all and bequeathed to us all, so that we can all have a wonderful relationship with our most beloved Lord Krishna and all of his associates, and Lord Gauranga and all of his associates. Thank you all so very much. I'll just open it up at this time. Thank you very much.
Does anyone remember my bright idea of having Vishnu John Maharaj? We slept so tight. I said, Maharaj, I've got a bright idea. We'll take the stage and we'll bring it in at night. And I'm small enough that I can crawl under and screw these legs in, and we'll have a double-decker sleeping program. It'll be great. And he looked at me and he said, it sounds crazy, but I'm willing to try it. I think Govinda Dutt must remember Janardhan. And again, forgive me, Maharaj, I don't have your name in front of me, so please forgive me if by addressing you by your former name. So we did that. We did that for a couple of weeks. And then finally we realized by the time we got done Sankirtan, set this up in the morning, we had to take it down, and then we stopped. But that was my harebrained contribution to our sleeping facility on the bus.
Well, there was a reason for that.
There you go. Thank you, Marge.
There was a reason for that. We were in Minnesota, another harebrained idea. Everybody else is in Florida. We should go to some place where nobody goes. Govinda mentioned that. And we went to Minnesota with Vishnu John Maharaj. Tamal Krishna Goswami was in India with Srila Prabhupada. This was January 76, just before we went to India, and then he left. And it was freezing cold. And you were in one of the vans. We didn't have room in the bus for everybody. So you were sleeping in a van with 4 others, and we did Mangal Arati. God, where's Prahlad and everybody? And we went to the van, and you guys were comatose because there was some kind of carbon monoxide leak. And we woke everybody up, and you came out, you were all woozy, and you had huge headaches for the whole day. I mean, another couple of hours, you might not have made it. So the next night, that was the first time we brought the stage in, so that everybody could be in the bus and not freeze to death or die. That's why we did it. And that's why I guess you got the inspiration.
Yeah, we really had some time. I'm sure, I think you were there with me. I remember first week or two, we're in some freezing place, and there was no water. And there's a devotee with a blowtorch at a campground site, trying to defrost the pipes, which was ridiculous. Anyway, we all wound up bathing in the snow, and we did that more than once. And boy, oh boy, boot camp's got nothing over that. It's so nice to see you, by the way. I think of you always. You were one of my favorites, Prabhu. So hopefully we can keep in touch after this somehow.
I remember another Govinda Dutt story when we were driving, and he was always so fixed. I mean, there was, every single day he was like a powerhouse. And we were going somewhere or another, and it was snowy. And this time he was driving the bus. He wasn't a regular bus driver, but he was driving the bus. And Kavichandra Prabhu had mentioned how these buses were not in the best of shape. The accelerator pedal wouldn't work. So he had a cord that went from the window out along the backside of the bus to the engine. And we're driving around and driving along, and there's snow everywhere on both sides of the highway. Not so much snow on the road, but occasionally ice patches. And those buses were old and beat up, but they could fly once they got going. And you didn't know, we didn't have a speedometer. That was another thing we didn't have, no speedometer. We never knew how fast we were going. So we're just plowing along, and we're looking back at the vans. And all of a sudden, one of them comes up, and it's Trilokaswar, who you mentioned. He was driving, and someone is waving at us. Govinda Dutt looks out the window. I look out the window. What do they want? I don't know. And then they faded back, and then we look in the mirror, and they had spun out into the snow. And then we had to stop, turn around, go back, get them, and found out that we'd been going about 90, and they couldn't keep up with us.
Well, what happened was there was no heat. So the inside of the van, there was a coating of ice. And we had one. Van? Say again?
Were you in that van?
I was in that van.
Oh.
I was in that van. So I had a lighter, and I'm holding it up, and we have about this much visibility from this lighter to melt this little bit of ice. And suddenly I hear, and we're flying all over the van. And I, in my mind, I thought it landed on its side, but obviously I'm not sure, my age, my recollection, but I was in that van. Yes. And I remember Vishnu John chastising Govinda, saying, "Why are you driving like a maniac?" He's like, "Maharaj, I'm not. But and they're going back and forth. And I said, it wasn't Govinda Dutt's fault. It was whoever it was Triloka, I think, driving the van at the time. Yeah.
He didn't know how fast we were going. No speedometer, no nothing. We're just cruising along fine.
Fortunately, no one was hurt or killed.
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can remember some of those campgrounds that we stayed, that we would bucket shower, and we had on Brahmin underwear, what we call Brahmin underwear, kopans, and you could hold them up like a sword because they froze. But somehow, like you said, we survived all that.
Miracle.
And one devotee, Keshiha, one time, sometimes it would be so cold, you'd pour the bucket and the spout, because it was a gallon milk jug. And as you were pouring, it would freeze and become smaller and smaller. And he was standing in the ice. And by the time he finished, his feet had frozen into the ice. And we had that kind of, those cracks you'd get in your heels, those big bloody cracks that you would get. So he lifted up and they all ripped out. And he comes back to the bus and his feet were all bloody and torn. And whew, yeah.
You know who was infamous for that? Ramacharya. He would go out in flip-flops on Sankirtan. It would be sub-freezing. And he would come back and, Goswami would say, "You can't do this, look at your feet." He was oblivious, He just wanted to serve Radha Damodar. It didn't matter to him. I remember.
Oh.
Go ahead.
He was in Costa Rica for many years. I've heard that he's in Alachua now, maybe, or was it North Carolina? One of those two places.
Wow.
He's around. I would love to see him.
It would be pouring rain. We'd go into the store and buy an umbrella. And at the end of the day, we'd be working at Kmart, Krishna Mart, right? And at the end of the day, we'd go back into the store. I need to return this umbrella. We didn't want to spend a dime on ourselves. All the money went to Prabhupada. I remember every day we had to put the Lakshmi in the bank, because sometimes the new devotee would try to run off with it. So I can remember we put it all in the bank one morning. I said, "Oh, we have no gas." And we were all hungry. So we made it to a gas station and we just asked people for Lakshmi, "Hey, we're monks, can you help us? We need $1 for some gas." And we filled up the tank like that. And then we collected a few more dollars so we could buy, something to offer for breakfast. We were so fanatical in those days.
And breakfast often consisted of a stick of butter and a bag of dates. I can remember devotees. I'm not sure if I was with one of you, they'd walk in the supermarket and take out their Brahmin thread and stand at the dairy section and offer the whole section, and then buy a bucket of sour cream and a bag of dates. Now, not so wise for a brahmachari, but that's how it went.
You'd burn it up. No problem.
Yeah.
We ran all day.
Yeah, it was
No problem.
throwing a thread. Hey, throw a thread on the veggies over there. I'll take care of the dairy. All right, it's all offered. But there was the intent. It wasn't just for us. We were thinking that it was prasadam distribution for everyone. That was, part of the intention there. Yeah.
If we had only fully grasped the mercy at the time. Anyway, by Krishna's grace, here we are. We're able to share these things, and I guess the real miracle is here we are. I speak for myself, because I think even when you met me, you were like, "This guy's not going to make it." I remember you teasing me. I think you're the one that came up with Philly Phil.
Yeah, Philly Phil.
You
mentioned Jiva. What is it, Jivadara? Was he that? Was he like from the islands, kind of Indian mixed body from the islands? Was that Jivadara?
Vaikuntha Dev. on. He's the one that mentioned to me just recently. Last night, actually, we spoke. The Jivadar. I remember the name, but I do not remember the body.
Is that
But-
true?
Yes.
Yes.
He's in Los Angeles. Well, he was in Los Angeles before the pandemic. I don't know. I haven't seen him since.
We used to call him in Brooklyn, Lead Pipe John.
I know he has some severe health issues.
Why is that?
There was a story. Everybody got a nickname in Brooklyn. You know, a Darcy who's been on these before, he was kind of like Ed. And he was Lead Pipe John because one 4th of July in Brooklyn, we were out on Sankirtan and we came back, we heard about a giant melee that had taken place at the temple. We had a kind of contentious relationship with the local neighborhood. A lot of young thugs, you know. And one 4th of July, they were throwing fireworks and M80s and ash cans at the temple door. And so one devotee went out on the front porch, Sumahat, and started throwing them back. And then pretty soon, devotees were coming outside and then going down the steps, started fighting with the locals, right? And there were more locals and they were tough and we were skinny and devotees were getting the worst of it. And everybody was into it. There's one Italian grandmother with a pitchfork holding Gopijana Balaba against a fence. Sumahat had 5 guys pounding him into a car and the devotees were going down hard and Jivadar walked out and he didn't have devotee clothes on because he was coming regularly and he had a lead pipe in his hand. He kept it at his side. He walked by and he went, whack! And some guy went down. He walked by again, whack! And another guy went down. He did this 3 times. And there were 3 thugs down on the ground. And it was kind of serious. I mean, they all had concussions. They had to go to the hospital, but it broke up the riot. And he was forever known after that. Lead Pipe John.
Any idea?
He was a hero. Yeah, in Brooklyn. Saved some lives.
Any idea what year that was?
That would have been maybe 73.
Okay.
73. After that, we started taking karate training. That was the
Really?
time of Kung Fu and Bruce Lee and everything. Yeah, so that we could defend the temple.
One of the things I left out was that I was getting such a twisted introduction to Krishna consciousness. I decided I'd never left Philly. I'd gone to Atlantic City and Wildwood. I got in my brand new car. I said, I'm going to go to Brooklyn Temple. No idea. Never been in New York. Drive up, knock on the door. My name's Bhakta Phil. I'm here for 1 week and I want to learn about Krishna consciousness. I'll chant 16 rounds. I'll wash Krishna's pots. And they're looking at me like, this guy's not going anywhere. So it was Gopi Janabalava, Romapad, and Adi Keshava. And that's exactly what I did. Yeah, that's exactly what I did. I stayed there. I chanted my rounds. And, you know, again, further solidified my faith hearing Vishnu Gadal lead a Mangala Arati. I always think to myself, you know, I pray that when that time comes where I'm checking out and punching the time clock, that I can just remember some of these wonderful devotees, some of these wonderful experiences. I have a particular fondness for you. I've been thinking about you for decades. And I know, I mean, really.
Who are you?
No, I know. Yeah, it is. It's sad, but it's true. And I'm so happy to see you. So happy. You have no idea.
Well, I feel the same way.
I'd like to confess.
I'm happy to hear Kavi Chandra Maharaj, because I was on a bus with him. And due to some failing health, because he got really sick after a while, he got taken back to New York or someplace, and I got to take over the bus. And that was a whole new life for me. I loved it.
You didn't stay in New York for very long, did you, when we were there? It was a
Well, I
short
was
period.
never in the Manhattan Temple. I was in Brooklyn. We visited the Manhattan Temple with our bus during the Christmas marathon of 75.
Right.
No, 76.
It was
76.
yeah.
Yeah, I have a lot of stories about all that. Govindadad alluded to a lot of it. It was actually 200,000 back to Godheads we got up to in a month as Radha Damodar. and then began to transition into big books. 200,000.
Wow, wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can't even imagine. And that year in 76, Tamal Krishna Maharaj had us come with our bus because, as you know, was mentioned, he was trying to compete with LA. It wasn't that we were competing with LA, it's whether we were competing with the entire zone. We had initially been listed as a temple because we had 100 people. We had about 100 people, 120 with management on Radha Damodar. So we were like a large temple, extra large temple. And we beat everybody. So then they made us compete as a zone. And so Ramaswar had not just LA, but San Diego and, you know, the whole West Coast. We're competing against the whole West Coast. And so Tamal said, oh, you got to come to New York. That's why he started accumulating temples, you know, so that he could compete against that. And that was quite, that's a whole long story. Can't tell it now. If I'm ever a talker on one of these, I can talk about that. But
you have to schedule a time, because I'm sure you have so many wonderful stories.
well, Brahma and me have a lot of Tamal Krishna Goswami stories. I won't
know you-
tell some of them though. So
No.
I'm not telling.
I actually consulted with somebody and said, what about this story? It's like, no, best not. Best, you know, just relish that yourself, or, you know, between your close friends. He actually sent me to get his passport when he went to China, and he had me make his little tiny set of beads that he could conceal in his hand. But it blew me, because I'd never seen him with hair.
Right.
So, you know,
And a suit.
and a suit. Yeah. Actually, Vaikuntha Dev was his servant at the time. He drove him down to get the suits, and yeah. I remember Rasagya was the one that called me to give me the news. I was was working for a devotee in a law firm, Ragaputra Das, and I was driving.
Ragaputra?
He left his body a few years ago, went off the side of a cliff with his motorcycle. But yeah, I reconnected with him here, and big guy, he comes in, he's dancing, I'm leading kirtan. I said, you look familiar, you know, and the rest, we just reconnected. But anyway, I remember pulling over. I was in such shock. I pulled over and I had to sit there for 15 minutes just to try and wrap my head around the whole thing. To me, he was sweet. I mean, you know, I got the sauce from him a couple of times, but he handled me with baby gloves. Probably because
So I was swimming with Vishnu John Swami in Mayapur in the Jalangi. This is 1976. I had no clue on the morning walk. They were talking about how Lord Chaitanya chastised Junior Haridas, etc. And Vishnu John Swami was not in the best of consciousness at the time. Me being 19 years old at the time, I had no clue. Just a kid. I'm swimming with Vishnu John Swami in a Jalangi. Hey, Maharaj, this is a totally transcendental river, isn't it? He said, yeah, Govinda, it's totally transcendental. I said, wow, we're in the middle of the Jalangi. I said, wow, if I died right now, would I go back to Godhead? He said, yeah, Govinda, you'd go right back to Godhead. I said, wow, Maharaj, what if I killed myself? Can you believe this? This haunts me to this day. Maharaj, what if I killed myself right now in the Jalangi? Would I go back to Godhead? Yeah, Govinda. That's the night he disappeared.
Yeah.
So this
Actually, Shastivar was the last to see him.
No kidding.
That morning, the morning after that night, they were up on the roof of the building. And Shastivar gets up, and Vishnu John was up there, and he said, Shasti. You know how he was. Shastivar described he was very illuminated and bright, kind of glowing. And he saw that he walked down the road and then walked out the gate. And that's the last anybody saw him. But it's not correct to say that we will go back to Godhead by taking our own lives in the Ganga or the Jalangi or the Trivedi, because Mahaprabhu chastised Sanatana Goswami and said, if I thought that by taking my own life, I could be with Krishna, I would do it 1,000,000 times. And then later, sometime later, Srila Prabhupada, I heard this story, Srila Prabhupada was sitting in a very contemplative way, just kind of staring, maybe with his eyes closed. And the devotee came up to him and said, what are you doing, Srila Prabhupada? He says, I'm listening to Vishnu John chant or sing. So at least he got like Chota Haridas. He probably got a devotional celestial body and continued in a very, very high way. He wasn't equipped anyway for what was going to be happening in the next 5 to 10 years. He was a sensitive person.
Yes, he was.
But
Yes,
we were on the bus with him in those months leading up to that. And there's all kinds of rumors that he was this and that. He was steady as a rock every night singing kirtan, very blissful, whether one person was there or 20 people. There may have been some, what was he, 27, 28? May have been some agitation, some attachment in his mind from his previous relationship. And no matter who you are at that age, it could bother you. And maybe he felt that this wasn't appropriate because he was so serious and he made that decision. But I'm just thinking that he got relieved from this and got put into a much more accelerated, better situation, whatever that would be.
Plus, I think he felt that how could he face his buddy Goswami? How, like there's a disconnect there, that there were, as close as they were. I don't think that would have been an option. But I've always thought exactly what you thought, that he was very sensitive. And anyway, boy, do I miss him. I'll never.
Fine. I tell you a story. For in the last many, many years, you always hear everybody talking about Vishnu John. And I was thinking, well, come on. It's only 26, 27 years old. I think we're getting a little carried away here about who this person was. I mean, obviously he was, very advanced, but come on. And then when I was in Oregon, I came across, somebody had an old cassette tape and it was a one of a kind. And it was of him giving a little lecture to some community college, probably with his stage and all, and then singing, and then talking to the audience. And I listened to the whole thing, and in these ensuing years, I've associated with a lot of different devotees of all kinds, from India, from branches of Gaudiya Math, many, many very advanced devotees, and heard people speak with a lot of weight and power. And yet when I heard that tape, I said, wow, this person is powerful. Powerful. It took sometimes some separation and some accumulated perspective, perhaps. But yeah, he was a very special person.
Can any of you confirm the story that Prabhupada was in LA and Vishnu John Maharaj was chanting bhajans, and he asked the devotee, what language is he singing in? And the devotee said he's singing in Sanskrit. And he said, no, he's singing in Italian. I've heard the story, but I've yet to confirm it from anyone who was there.
So I heard from Lakshmi Nrsimha. He's from Italian extraction, right?
Yes.
And he was playing a tape of Vishnu John for his grandmother. And it was Vishnu John singing Kabhi Habe Bolo Se Dinamar. And you know how he sang it? Kabhi Habe Bolo Se Dinamar. That tape.
Yes.
And he said his Italian grandmother didn't understand anything, but she starts weeping listening to it. So he certainly had the heart of an Italian, maybe. Or he could move the heart of an Italian.
He's a rare soul.
Yeah.
I mean, combination, the two of them together. Just over the top. I remember Goswami would say, Vishnu John Maharaj, when you speak, you're so sentimental. Vishnu John would turn on and say, too bad, Goswami. I don't want to like you. It had this little thing going back and forth, and it was always so adorable.
Brahma has a story about the spider in the web.
Yeah, I did that story the first night.
Ah,
Yeah.
I did that story the first night. You could catch up on it in the archives.
all right, all right. This is the first one of these I've been able to attend because of conflict of schedule. And actually, I'm gonna have to run. I gotta go.
Yeah,
attend-
it's on YouTube.
Maharaj,
Yeah.
They're on
Yeah, but
YouTube. You
I
can catch
seen
up
it
on it.
live.
Can I get your contact information from Sabya and keep in touch?
What's that?
Can I get your contact information from Sabya and keep in touch with you,
Yeah,
communicate?
sure.
Okay.
Sure. I'm
Thank
on
you.
Facebook again. I was kicked off for something, closed down for something or other. I think I messed around with my identity and they closed me off unless I gave them my passport and everything.
Who would want to do?
Huh?
Just kidding.
Anyway,
Who would-
I have an identity on it now again, but I haven't posted anything yet. So anyway, we're in Houston, headed west. So be catching up with people. Jai,
Bernard,
Thank you, Maharaj, and thank you, Prabhus. We'll bring this to a close now. Our next session will be on the 23rd of April. Stay tuned for the 23rd of April. We're going to continue this. We'll have 3 more speakers, and of course, others will come on. All of you can come on and speak more, and we'll just continue to go down. We're so
May I
fortunate.
please add one story?
Yes, please.
This is Mishra Bhagavan Das, Radha Kali Chanji Dham. And
Haribo.
does Janardhan remember being in Detroit right up until we went to Mayapur in March 1976?
I do.
That was a really amazing, that was Vishnu John Swami, Tamal Krishna Goswami, and Jayananda.
I
Yep.
remember that. I remember.
Because we brought Jayananda, his wife divorced him, so Tamal Krishna Maharaj preached to him the glories of renunciation and convinced him to join the bus. So Uncle Jayananda would take out the man. He was like Mr. Nice Guy. That was so sweet. And so he was like the Bhakta leader. And he would take out the new man on book distribution after the festival. So we had, those days, we had this combination. I've been begging Goswami to get on his bus for a long time. So he finally let me on in January 1976. So I got to spend the 3 months with Jayananda, Tamal Krishna Goswami, and Vishnu John Swami, and mostly in Detroit. They just bought the new temple, and they put us out in the garage. So I remember Janardhan always running around trying to organize everything, and he had the one maxi van with the orange stripe. So then one day we had class in the morning in the Detroit Temple, and Jayananda was giving class. So Jayananda was talking, he'd become really inspired about renouncing and giving every bit of your life to spreading Krishna consciousness, giving up household life and all attachments. So he preached about that, and then there was one householder that became upset because, he's a householder and he didn't like this brahmachari is better type stuff, and so he started pounding on Jayananda Prabhu. He wasn't really asking questions. He was like chastising. He was saying, how can you talk about the householders? The wife is the good wife is a suitable boat for crossing the ocean of nations, and grihe tako, vane tako, and whether you're householder, whatever you are, just worship Krishna. And so he was going on like this. And I was looking over at Tamal Krishna Maharaj, who didn't appreciate Jayananda being treated that way. So he was like kind of like a kettle that was just sort of simmering, and then it just, at a certain point, it just boiled over. And Goswami broke into the conversation. I remember him sitting there so stern behind his danda. And he says, so why have all of our previous acharyas given up household life at some point and renounced everything and given the last years of their, if not their entire lives, at least the last part of their life entirely to Krishna consciousness? And all of a sudden, then everything just went completely silent. And Goswami had basically put an end to the lecture. But he was so protective of Jayananda, and Jayananda was so humble that he was just sitting there taking it. But Small Krishna Maharaj, he wouldn't take it, and that was really great times. That was when we went out to. I was in Flint, Michigan. We were out in the snow doing book distribution. That's when I did a Dial Abhajan with Vishnu John Maharaj, and we were doing it.
Yeah.
That was really a great time, those last couple months. And then I remember that we all went to New York and got on that plane to go to the Mayapur festival. And I remember Vishnu John Maharaj had his danda was coming unraveled, and Small Krishna Goswami said, Vishnu John, you got to fix your danda. But I remember Vishnu John was kind of, in a heavy mood at that time, sort of, getting ready for what he was going to do. But I just wanted to talk about the time of Radha Damodar, when it wasn't just Vishnu John Maharaj and Small Krishna Maharaj, but also Jayananda. There was that period. So you had this dynamic trio.
Thank you, Mr. Bhagavan Prabhu. We'll have you come on and also speak so that you'll have the time. And of course, for you also, Vikanas Maharaj, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this correctly, coming on as well, giving you quality time so that you can speak about your wonderful experiences and pastimes during that time. Thank you all so very much. I have people who actually are running this program or going off, so it's going to switch off. And before it switches off, I'd like to say thank you all so very much for coming on. We really appreciate you coming on, and we look forward to seeing you again in our future programs. Like I said, on the 23rd of April is our next one. We'll let you out the time and everything else as soon as possible. Thank you all very much. Hare Krishna. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha.
Vanchakalpatarubhyascha.
Vanchakalpatarubhyascha. Kripa Sindhu Bevacha. Patitanam Pavanebhyo. Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha.
Jai Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Radha Damodar ki jai.
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 Haribol, Haribol.
Haribol.
Hare.